So today we have a question from an anonymous member. Does anyone have a solution for exporting long videos from Filmora? 12 hours took him or her 35 hours to export. Crazy. Personally, I'm surprised that the project didn't crash on the computer. But let's talk about some things you can do to have a good workflow to expedite all the parts of the video creation without having to spend 35 hours exporting it. Generally, when you get up into videos that are going to be over an hour long, you need to do some serious thinking about memory management. Filmora is powerful enough to overcome any computer, regardless of how powerful that computer is. You can create up to 100 tracks, which in itself is one way that really bogs down a computer when it's rendering, whether it be in the preview mode or in the export mode. These are things that this is one of the things that really chokes up a computer. But with proper planning, you could easily do a larger project. Now, there's two ways you can get into this situation. One is you're not thinking about it, and you are making a project that all of a sudden becomes bigger than your computer can handle. And I'll put some links in the description to this video, some suggestions for how you can salvage a project that you worked on for a long time but now is too big for you to export. But let's, in this video, discuss some tools and techniques that you can use to ensure that you're not faced with a project that's either going to crash your computer or take multiple days in order for you to export it. So you've gathered all your media together, and you find that you have almost a terabyte worth of data, and you know this is going to be a long video and you've got a lot of stuff to trim and so forth to get it just right. What are some of the things that you can do to minimize the amount of memory that you're going to use? So before starting a massive project, which is really going to require a lot of resources, and I mean computer hardware resources, look for ways in which you could break that project into smaller segments. For example, in this project I showed you here from Arizona, I went in and I decided to break it into days of the trip. And each segment of the video then becomes one day of the week. Now, this is just one way of breaking it up chronologically. It may also be possible if you're like staying at a resort or something like that and you're doing a full review of the resort, break it into areas of the resort. You know, you're going to review the restaurants in one part, you're going to review the pools in another part, and so forth, to review the various different aspects of the resort. But the point is, look for ways in which you can break your project into segments. If you had, for example, in this project here, a 12-hour video that took 35 hours to export, and you were able to export it in 12 different segments, it would be far less than 35 hours. Yes, you're going to end up with 35 video clips. But when you're building your project, you're generally using more than one track. You have a video track, you might have an audio track as a bare minimum, but you're going to be putting in resources like effects and stickers and transitions and titles and all that sort of stuff. And you're going to end up with multiple tracks. And obviously you can create up to 100 tracks, which are really bogged down even the most capable computer. So if you can break a project into segments, that's a way to go about it. Because when you export a segment of your project, and if you can export it at a slightly higher quality than what your final project is going to be, even better. But even if you're exporting it at the same quality or resolution that the final project is going to be created in, that's fine. You're going to have minimal loss anyway. But when you export it, everything, and I'm talking about video, audio, everything is reduced into one track. Once you've completed all of your segments, you start a new project and you import your various segments. You just line them up against each other. Now it will require a lot less processing, and the export for the final project will be very fast. So instead of doing 12 hours of videos in one clip and exporting for 35 hours, 12 one-hour clips would probably export much quicker. Again, a lot depends on your hardware, but just even without thinking about the hardware, 12 segments plus a combine of the 12 segments into a 13th export will be much faster than 35 hours. The next thing you should take into consideration is how you import your information. Here, for example, is a video clip. It's 12 gigabytes. Obviously, that's a lot of information. But are you really going to use all 12 gigabytes of that data? Most likely not. However, if you bring it in and you drop it down on the timeline at the maximum resolution or whatever, even if you don't do a maximum resolution, that's a lot of memory. Now, in the editing process, you're going to go in here and you're going to cut out segments, and you're going to say, well, I'm going to use that, but I'm not going to use this. And you're going to delete this. Well, guess what? Even if you do delete snippets of the project and you save it and you go out and you come back in, all of that stuff, the stuff that you cut out, is still loaded up when you open up the project again the next time. So you're clogging up the memory of your computer, which is your most valuable resource when you're trying to work on a large project, with unwanted material. How can you do that differently? And just to prove my point, you can do this at anything, but if you take this 12 gigabyte clip that I just put in here, if I shut off the project and open it up again, I could stretch it out to the full length, the full length of the original clip. And the only reason I can do that is because it's still sitting in memory. So therefore, you're working with stuff clogging up your memory. And believe me, you have plenty of other stuff running in the background and other programs and things like that that's clogging your memory. If you could eliminate that, you would automatically be improving your rendering process. The 35 hours would already become much less. So how can you do that? And I'm going to link in the video the description of how to use this tool. But instead of importing it just like this, you should, let's just delete it for now. You should use the import media with the instant cutter tool. And like I said, I'm going to leave a link to this. And it does have some limitations. I don't think it will accept an extremely large file like this one here. Let's see if it will do that. Oh, yeah, it did. Okay, so here we got a 12 gigabyte file that got imported. I'm not going to go through the process of it. But what the Instant Cutter tool does, it allows you to cut out all of the things you know you're not going to use before you import it. And you can actually have multiple segments. And again, I'm not going to go through the process of how to do that. You can look at my other video on how to use the Instant Cutter tool. Anyway, it's a lossless method of trimming your video clips so that when you import it into Filmora, just the segments that you want to use out of each individual video clip, you will not lose any quality whatsoever. So that would be the number one tool that you should start use before you even import stuff into the computer. The next step to consider, and this is not so much for exporting it, rendering it for the export. It's more for the editing process, and that is to use proxy files. I have another video, and I'm going to put a link for that into the description as well. Proxy files versus preview rendering, and what the two different processes are. But if you go and you should go to your file, you should go to your preferences, and you should go over to the performance section, scroll down, and you should reset your proxy settings. And you can have your proxies automatically created when you bring them in. And you can lower this resolution to as low as possible, where you can still go ahead and edit your material. This is not going to affect your final export. This is only what's used for you while you're editing to make it smooth and lag free. You would lower this to some one of these other values, and also of your high resolution images. Any changes you make to a proxy file is applied to the video when it's exported. And as long as you're in here, what you need to do then also is go into the media cache section. This is, of course, is where you delete stuff. But there is a setting here for your proxy files, and that is automatically delete proxy files when project is closed. When you're working with a big project and you're going to have a lot of proxy files, I would recommend that you do not activate the delete when the project is closed, because it means that every time you open up the project, every video clip that you have or every image that you have that requires a proxy file to be created will have to be recreated when it's loading up. And that can be extremely slow, especially when you're dealing with massive amounts of data. So leave this off. And then instead, when you're done with your large project, go in here, hit the clear button, and clear out the proxy files at that time. Finally, let's just talk about hardware. If you are going to be producing these massive videos on a regular basis, it would be highly recommended that you have some robust hardware. And the most important piece of that hardware would be the GPU. Let's just quickly look at the Windows Task Manager. And if you're using a Mac, it's called the Activity Monitor. It would show you the same thing. You call that up, and you have this Performance tab. Now, I'm going to leave a link to another video that I've created demystifying crashes, lagging, and other weird effects in Filmora. For having the smoothest editing experience, rendering experience, it's worth your while to invest in a quality GPU. That's your video card. And get something with ray tracing. Yes, CUDA cores are important. They're like a simple calculator calculating all the stuff that's changing. That does do a big part of the process. But ray tracing is a smaller part of the GPU, and it does the hard stuff of the lighting within the scenes of your computer when you're rendering either 3D or decoding or encoding videos. This is when this really comes into use. You want an adequate amount of GPU memory dedicated. You can use the other memory on the motherboard, but that's a little further away. And if you run out of that, it starts using your disk. And when it starts writing to the disk, that's when you're in real danger of crashing your computer, because a disk is never as fast as memory. So it's good to have a good CPU that has a decent clock speed, and it should be able to overclock, that is to on occasion run faster than it needs to be. You can see the base speed of my GPU is 3.2 gigahertz, but it will actually overclock up to 6 gigahertz. So this is something that would help you out. We talked about having, an adequate amount of memory on the motherboard. When Filmora executes instructions, this is when it has to use the memory. It puts the program into various memory section on the memory that's on the motherboard, and then it calls that up. The hard drive, of course, when you're reading and writing data, having an SSD drive versus an HD drive is good because it has a faster data transfer, and it does come into play. But if you want to see the difference between different setups, the video I referred to that I'm going to leave a link to in the description, demystifying crashes and so forth in Filmora. At the end of this 30-minute video, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, go to the end where I export the exact same project, 12 gigabytes, on 4 different setups, on different quality RTX units, as well as Intel built-in GPU, as well as if you don't have the proper GPU, but in the performance section you have you send instructions to the GPU, is actually the worst case scenario, and you'll see the difference on this 12 gigabyte 20 gigabyte project in exporting. It can vary from 12 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it is in the video to over an hour for the exact same project, depending on your hardware. So some consideration of your hardware. If you're going to do a number of these, you should think about that. If you're only doing this as a one-time project, then I wouldn't worry about it so much. Just work within your limitations using the other tips that I've given you in this video.